For 17 years, La Bahari did everything he could to prove he wasn't dead. First, La Bahari tried legal avenues, visiting government offices, the police, the courts, filing paperwork to get his name put back on official records. But when legal methods failed, he started breaking the law in very public ways. Besides, La Bahari thought if they arrested him under his real name, they'd have to recognize that he was alive. They'd have to admit there'd been a mistake. That's when Lal's family declared him dead legally. It was a trick to claim his land. La Bahari tried filing paperwork. He tried exposing the fraud that ruined his name. He tried the local government and the police and getting arrested. But nobody wanted to recognize the corruption. Nobody wanted to lose face and admit that something was wrong with the system. Nobody would even write his name on an official complaint because dead men can't lodge complaints. Years of not being able to own land or take a loan led to greater desperation. Eventually, La Bahari found himself kidnapping a cousin from the family who had faked his death. In 1985, La Bahari snatched a cousin as he was leaving school. But La Bahari didn't know what to do with him, so he took the young boy to the movies for 5 straight days. Day after day, La Bahari grabbed him from the school and took him to see the shows. But the family refused to call the police. So La Bahari asked the village butcher to sell him some goat's blood so he could stain the boy's shirt to scare the parents. But the butcher wouldn't do it. Eventually, a journalist friend convinced La Bahari to drop the kidnapping plan altogether. So Lal moved on to riskier crimes. Crimes like protesting politicians in a part of India that still regularly jails protesters. Lal began bribing policemen to arrest him or file cases against him. He even interrupted the state assembly, angering politicians who were mid-speech. As La Bahari did more and more to make himself a public spectacle, he began to gather a following. Nearly 100 people would join him before he would be declared legally alive again. All of them were dead men and women. All of them were wronged by their families and taken off official records so their assets could be seized. This was how the Association of Dead Men had started, an association that could have been extinguished quickly, quietly, if the local government hadn't made the bureaucratic process of being declared alive an impossible errand. You're listening to The Re-Engineered You. This is a podcast about self-empowerment and all the myths, lies, and misconceptions we tell ourselves. Then we use science and history to bust those myths and re-engineer a better you. I'm your host, Todd Laments, the extrovert.
And I'm the writer, researcher, and introvert, Joe Anthony, whose job it is to dig through the outer layer of no-duh on the internet and get to the facts.
The term life admin refers to the office work it takes to run a household, or just keep track of your own health and finances. We're talking about taxes, insurance, rent, car payments, everything. Even how many points you have left on the Pizza Hut app before you get a free pizza. Or how many website privacy agreements you're forced to ignore. At some point, the blizzard of agreements we have to click, boxes we have to check, and helplines we have to navigate just becomes a wall of white noise. Life admin errands haven't become an isolated problem for medical insurance or billing or taxes. Life admin errands have taken over everything. Every business seems to have an automated answering system, or rebates, or surveys to interface with the public for basic needs. And it's all getting a bit much. So today, we're talking about errand paralysis, a very new term for a rapidly growing problem. And we have 3 myths we want to bust about this phenomenon. Myths like Myth 1, errand paralysis isn't real. It's a made-up millennial term. Back in my day, we called it burnout. And we just worked through it. It's not like it costs us a few $100 billion in healthcare each year, right? Myth 2. To show we're not just whiners whining, we're going to reveal how long it could really take to answer every work email, or read every website privacy policy, or how much you could lose, on average, by not paying close attention to your medical bill. Myth 3. Errand paralysis and burnout seem to be the favorite chew toys of self-help gurus. Self-help authors all have opinions about how you should just de-stress, take a beach vacation, and buy more of their books. So we'll provide actual advice about burnout from real medical sources. But first, Joe and I are going to compare our errands for the week and see whose errand paralysis comes closest to Lal Bahari, trying to resurrect himself on official records.
So our subject today, we're covering errand paralysis, what in the 70s used to be just called burnout, but we're putting sort of a finer point on it. And our hero, Lal Bahari, he was given basically the impossible errand of prove you're alive still to a small government. And from what I can understand from these stories, his family, it was corruption, right? Like they bribed somebody?
It's very common corruption in that country. And what it is your family members, let's say that you're out of town or your family moves to another village, your cousins, uncles, your ex-family members that you don't see anymore will go down and declare you dead so they can claim your land.
Okay. Well, here in America, we have a history of poisoning relatives and then claiming their money. I guess that skips the middleman if you just, declare them dead.
Taking out life insurance on them and then taking them on a hunting trip.
Right, exactly. So, not all errand paralysis comes from trying to prove you're alive to a corrupt government. Our government arguably is corrupt enough, but more importantly, businesses and independent systems are corrupt in, I guess corrupt might not be the word, but they certainly utilize how much errand fatigue we have. So I'm going to ask you, Todd, what is an errand or like a series of errands that almost cost you a bunch of money?
Well, mine cost me a lot of money. I owned a construction company in Seattle, and I delegated a lot of the paperwork things, the accounting, payroll to an accountant, someone I trust, someone I knew, someone who was in the family. So I was in the state of Washington, and so there's a sales tax. So on every job, you collect 8% sales tax. Well, this accountant, who I assumed was taking care of this, didn't pay the state taxes. And this went on for about 3 years. So with the gross sales, 8 to 10%, it ended up turning into $80,000, $90,000 that we owed, that we already collected, that we owed the state, that we didn't have, that we'd already spent on other things.
Oh, wow. Taxes definitely fall under our errand fatigue. Did you know that here in America, we almost had a system where you don't do taxes? Like you get a card from the government or a postcard basically that says, here's what we took this year, and sign it if it's correct.
Oh, wow. So then you have to go and try to get your money back if they're wrong? You have to audit the government?
It was more like, from what I could understand, if you said, no, this is incorrect, they would just go back and look at their books. So like, it was a streamlined system where the government just confirms whether they took the right amount or not.
So billionaires would have to pay taxes at that point.
Yeah, unfortunately,
It might not be a bad system.
businesses and billionaires might have to pay taxes if that happens, which that'd be tough on them. How
Heavens
dare you?
forbid, right?
Yeah. No,
Well,
we.
I also had another one on the exact same business.
Oh, please.
There's a process of this accountant, and I'm going to blame all of them. What I really should be blaming myself, because you can't expect what you don't inspect, right?
Okay.
They also had L&I insurance, which is to protect the consumers in case something goes wrong. It's also to protect your employees. And we didn't have one single L&I claim from an employee or from anybody. But our L&I insurance expired. So they ended up suing. They ended up with, just in fines alone. Again, we didn't have one single claim to pay back. They fined us $45,000.
Wow.
So just from this two clerical errors, it was over $100,000.
That is crazy. Individually, it's not always that big a stakes, but it seems to me that like personal accounting, like what you said, you inspecting your own books, looking at your own bills, filling out your own rebates, things like that. They can cost little tiny amounts here and there, but they can get big. There are these big ones that come every couple of years, but more likely what's going to bite you over and over is the tiny ones that hit you throughout the year. I had an errand. I received a medical bill, and I did the dumb pedestrian thing where I was like, oh, they must be billing me the proper amount. I looked at it. It was the services I got from a hospital, and it was about $9,000, and it looked correct. And I did the thing that like I watched a CNN news report where they're like, don't be charged $300 for a single aspirin. So I actually went through and itemized it too. What I didn't do, I didn't check to make sure that they had tried to bill my union first. So what they were doing is they were billing me directly. And that one little mistake, I paid them. Like I stopped, I looked at the bill, and then I signed off on it.
Because you assume the insurance had already paid its part, and this was yours.
Right, exactly. What actually happened was the billing was needlessly complicated in how they stated how they billed you, but not in the itemized list. So, I spent another 10 months every day, or like every 1 day a week on the phone with them, trying to get them to go through my union to get the money back.
So in time too, you're probably up to about $600-$700, and then you had the micro stress of worried about it.
Right.
And wanting to be right and win this.
It became the week destroying Monday ritual, doing this errand.
They know you down there at the call center. They just put you on hold. Oh, hi, Joe.
I would love to see the record, because they would tell me when I called them, they'd be like, oh, you have notes within notes within notes on your file, and it's an infinity mirror of notes people had taken as they were calling me.
I would have put you on forever hold.
Yeah. So how about this week in errands? We're going to be really short about this because we don't want to like spend forever. But for me, this week in errands, I had about 30 emails, 20-ish needed replies. I had a family emergency. I paid utilities. There was a class action lawsuit from an old employer I had to read through. And a card-based refund for $20 that I overpaid at a different hospital that needed activation to get my money. And that could have been something they would have in the past just sent as a check.
Should be automatic.
Right. They had my credit card. They could have just deposited it back.
No, but they know that if they put that stop wall up, only 50 or 60%, whatever it is, will take the time. Because it's such a small amount.
Yes, some small percent of people will not activate that card. And the bank knows a percent of people won't use up all the money on that card. They'll use up, $18 out of 20. So there's a nickel and diming system here.
But you see this with banks. You'll see these huge billboards up that say, open an account here and get $200 free cash. Well, the reason they don't want to give $200 to everybody, they know that people are going to be lazy and not cancel it after the period, right?
Right, exactly.
Enough that it's worth it.
Yeah, online subscriptions work the same way. So our man here, Lal Bahari, whenever I get bad news, like you did not fill out this bill or you did not fill out this rebate, now you're going to incur costs. Or even better, when you get those, there's spam calls that are like, the insurance on your car and your car insurance is about to expire, and you're like, you start laughing. You're like, you don't even know me. Like, you don't know there's no way this is accurate. Did our dead man, did he go through the same thing?
Well, he went to a government office. He had no heads up on this. So this is like you going to the DMV, Joe, to re-up your license. They look at you and say, you're dead, get out of here. So he was shocked. He laughed. He thought it was a big joke. Now, he was only 22 years old, so he didn't know what all this meant. He didn't have a lot of life experiences. He had to really research this. Now, like I said, the typical victim has been out of town for a while, and that's what it was with Lal Bahari. His father died when he was young, and his mother, so they could make a living and survive, had to move out of town. You want to know how much his life was worth?
How much?
300 rupees. So I looked that up, and so that was $4 US. Now that was 1976, right? So this property wasn't worth a whole shit of a lot, right? We're not talking about 800 acres or something.
I was imagining this grand like Greek tragedy where they're scheming for his empire. They just took like an alleyway from him, basically.
So 4 cousins, you divvy it up, it's $1 a piece.
Right. And
I love doing inflation. So the year was 1976 when this went down. But in today's money, Joe, that's a whole $20. So $5 a cousin.
That's me declaring you dead for like a 7-Eleven pizza. That is wild.
Now, how the cousins pull this off? They go to, it's called I'm going to mispronounce, a Lekpal. And that's kind of like someone who's in charge of all the records for the village, who knows whose property is, all the birth certificates and everything. So they go and bribe him, and they just tell him that this is our land, Lal Bahari's dead, and it's just that easy. So a bribe and the name, and it's over.
Okay.
Now, we talked about the properties, not 300 acres. This was over a fifth of land. These are very poor people. So Lal Bahari came because he really needed this. He needed to borrow money off of it to keep farming, to keep his life going.
Okay.
So right away, he started to get aggressive and offensive, and he started to go to various branches of the government, everyone he could, in person, to say, hey, I'm not dead, I'm right here.
And they properly filled out the paperwork and got him alive again?
They booted him out. He even went to a lawyer, and the lawyer laughed at him and said, you're a dead man, get out of here. I can't help you. I'll never get paid. Forget it.
Wow, okay.
And not only that, but all the people in the village were mean to him. They would say, oh, look, like here comes a ghost. And they would mock him, and they would say, oh, a dead man is here. So he was humiliated as long as being dead.
Okay. When we first started getting into this, I didn't understand that part. Like I didn't think about it in the right way, because some of these people who were declared dead, they're really tragic figures. They're like somebody's grandpa got declared dead by like their son, and all his stuff was taken. This one, Lal Bahari in particular, it would be like in college if like 3 or 4 of your cousins who were around the same age, so like you're 22, and a bunch of your jerk cousins declared you dead so they could like get your 1971 Civic, and split the money. That is kind of funny. Like I kind of actually understand the humor in that.
Like when you were little, they used to beat you up for the piñata candy, those same mean cousins.
Right, yeah.
And you'd cry.
Yeah, and then everybody in the village, I mean, like I don't think they realize how difficult Law's life is about to be because he was declared legally dead. That is kind of humorous, a little bit, just a tiny bit.
I don't think it's that funny.
No.
I'm not seeing, because this is the old thing. What if it happened to you? And it could happen to you.
So the equivalent that I've seen before in my own life, I remember one of my friends, we found an obituary that had his name in it, and it was just somebody who shaved the name. We all laughed at him. That would be kind of similar, except this will destroy Law's life over time.
Yeah.
That's the best I can do rationalizing what they're about to say.
That's a stretch.
It's a little bit of a stretch, yeah.
An obituary from an 80-year-old is not the same thing.
Yeah, it's not quite the same as filling out the paperwork to have your friend declared dead.
And keep in mind, he didn't ride in on American Airlines here to do this. He had nothing. He walked to this village, or
right,
footed it in
yeah,
for some really bad news.
Everybody's got nothing, and they're stealing their nothing from each other. So we're going to talk about burnout. The episode title is Aaron Paralysis, but this really started as the phenomenon of burnout. Have you ever read the BuzzFeed article, Millennials? It's the Burnout Generation. It was by Anne Helen Peterson. It's called How Millennials Became the Burnout Generation. How long ago would you guess that burnout was like a term?
He said 70s, but I think it well into the 80s.
Yeah, it really sort of got kicking into the 80s and 90s, like especially as sort of like economy went through slumps and people actually truly started feeling burned out by filling out, piles of paperwork and getting dead-end jobs.
I haven't heard it for a while though.
Yeah, it's making a comeback. Thanks to millennials and this new sort of business tactic of making hoops for people to jump, it is definitely coming back. So the reason why this BuzzFeed article was such a big deal, it came out back in 2019, sorry. So just a couple years ago. Before this article, Simon Sinek, you're familiar with Simon Sinek?
Very. I've read a lot of his stuff.
Find
Your Why.
Find Your Why. That is such a great talk. I love that one. Have you noticed that he's a little bit harsh on millennials?
He makes jokes about them, yeah. He's a little bit older than them, and
yeah. There are a lot of self-help speakers and a lot of sort of like neo-business gurus who come down hard on millennials and kind of treat them as they're princes and princesses,
entitled dreamers.
They kill industries and they demand to have self-satisfaction and self-actualization through their work, when older people know that work is work. Work is just something that you do to get money, and then you go home and find your satisfaction there.
I think it's funny because they act like millennials invented laziness. Trust me. There was lots of lazy people, including those same parents who are calling their kids lazy.
Right. So there is some, I will not take out the human factor from this. I will say there is always the chance that millennials are actually being lazy. But statistically, it's unlikely that an entire generation has been pampered or changed or something. If you go back to like ancient Greece, you'll see philosophers and senators complaining about the younger generation is softer and lazier, and they're not holding their own. The Athenians today haven't gone on any kind of raids, and how dare they?
Too quick to go that south on mankind.
Right, exactly. This Anne Helen Peterson article, she kind of takes great pains to really lay out what millennial burnout is, and she retitles it. She helps recoin a term called Aaron Paralysis. And we're gonna kind of walk through. I'm gonna read a quote here actually first because we want to encapsulate this. Anyone listening to the episode, we're gonna find solutions to errand paralysis. We're gonna find solutions to being hit with so many errands in a day, so many rebates to fill out, so many boxes to check that you don't feel like you can do one more freaking call in to get your rebate or get your bills taken care of. So this is from the article. Quote, "The exhaustion experienced in burnout combines an intense yearning for this state of completion with the tormenting sense that it cannot be attained, that there is always some demanding or anxiety or distraction that can't be silenced." And that's from Josh Cohen. He was a psychoanalyst who specialized in burnout. He also said, "You feel burnout when you've exhausted all your internal resources, yet cannot free yourself of the nervous compulsion to go on regardless."
I get that because I'll procrastinate them, and so many new ones will add to the stack that I probably don't even remember how many I've lost.
Right. The person that wrote this article jokes that it's called like the inbox of shame when you've done all the important stuff and what you're left with are errands that are kind of helpful to your life, but they're not going to kill you if you don't do them immediately. She uses the example. These are tasks that aren't hard, but she was just not able to do them day to day. Getting knives sharpened, taking the boots to the cobbler, registering a Darkfoot license, sending someone a signed copy of her book, scheduling an appointment with a dermatologist, donating books to the library, vacuuming a car, emails. One that she brings up, and this is one that we're going to really focus on. She said her partner was so stymied by multi-step and incredibly purposefully confusing processes for submitting insurance rebates forms every single week for therapy that he was in, that he just didn't send them. Like he stopped, and it ate over $1,000 a week. And that to me seems to be the perfect example of what it's supposed to do, of what there are systems now in place that rely on us being burnt out. And that's what they do. They pile onto the stack, and hopefully you'll forget them. And they know that a very certain percentage of their clients will just not, they'll accept the pay. They'll accept that they have to pay it. Now, do you think that older generations were better equipped to like deal with this load of calls and things? Like I remember I've seen movies and TV where the mom is always on like a spring corded phone in the kitchen taking care of this kind of stuff, right?
You're in a different universe because back then, now what do they lead you to if you call anybody? They're going to lead you to their app. They're going to lead you to their web page, which you have to set up all new logins, which you have to save. Back in the day, there was nothing like that. And another big one was there was no email and there was no texts or phone calls, cell phones. Nobody had a cell phone unless you were a doctor or something. So think about it. How much more work do they get out of you when they can text you or email you at any times? I had a boss who when Wi-Fi just started on planes, but it wouldn't transmit until you got landed at your airport. So he'd be on the plane for 3 hours. He bragged to me once that he would type up so many emails and that he loved the fact that as soon as he landed, all of his salespeople would be bombarded with 10 emails they had to read from him. He thought it was cool to just overload us with work while he was doing nothing.
He was literally using the plane to bombing run his emails. Like he was drop bombing emails on everybody. Yeah. How many passwords do you need? Like here in Oregon, we just had we're vaccinating right now for COVID. And I remember last year I made an account for the Oregon health system for an insurance thing. And then this year I had to make an account for the Oregon health system for the vaccine thing. Those are from the same state, the same department, the same office, but they made me create a separate account for both of them.
Or for me to buy pet food online.
Yeah.
I mean, like, absolutely.
Please make an account.
Everything.
You're like, you could buy this for $9, or if you make an account with us with an email, it's $8.
It's not that I'm lazy, but I get sick of saving it. So I just, when I try to log in, I just hope it's like my bank one, you know.
Right.
And then you have to recreate a new one because you're always wrong.
Right, exactly. Yeah, I've got a couple hundred logins, and I'm not even online that much. I mean, I'm researching, but it's crazy. This is what the way this author justifies it from BuzzFeed. She says something that really struck home with me. Now I'm in the upper, the older scale of millennials. But she said the sin, she was saying that, like, why did we do this? She's justifying the sin of letting the system take over our lives. Here's what she says. We didn't try to break the system, since that's not how we've been raised. We tried to win it. She says, I never thought the system was equitable. I knew it was winnable for only a small few. I just believed I could continue to optimize myself to become one of them. As somebody who subscribes to self-help, that really rings true with me. Like, I believe I can win if I just am more efficient with my day, right?
No, it's a time burglar, and it's not worth your time. I really believe it needs to be delegated. So you can spend 80, 90% of your time doing what you do best, which is not logging in to government sites. It's to writing fiction and nonfiction.
Yeah, it's not creating emails and reading, viewing agreements for websites.
And why is it a sign of intelligence to write really long emails?
Right.
What the hell? Everybody. Why don't we shorten these things up to just the points so we don't, use all those calories unnecessary?
Right. Just so people don't think we're whining about nothing, there's 2 articles here that have some really good stats to them. One of them came from Britain. We pulled from a Guardian article that said that according to a 2018 survey, 2,000 Brits were surveyed. The average adult carries out 109 admin tasks per year. And those are like sorting out car insurance, council tax. About half the people who did this said that they struggled to keep up with household paperwork. It's one of those boring and overwhelming anxieties of our age, and we ignore it for each other. Like, we don't give it credence. From Forbes had some fantastic numbers. Do you want to hear about like the American cost of burnout, specifically from this like burnout generally, but this ties to air and fatigue because a lot of this talks about workplace.
The way your voice is peaking up, I guess it's probably higher than I think.
It's so high. Burnout costs between 125 billion and 190 billion every year in healthcare costs, according to Forbes. They estimate
how much?
125 billion
with a B
to 190 billion. Basically, anything that takes somebody out of work that isn't an injury, it's burnout. It's this. And they said that researchers estimate that workplace stress accounts for 8% of all national spending on healthcare. So not heart attacks, not cancer, not childhood leukemia. 8%. So nearly a tenth of our national spending is on burnout. If you want to look at this from an employer, burnout leads to disengaged employees, and that costs their employers 34% of their annual salary. Burnout is responsible for employee turnover. I always thought that if an employee left a company, it's almost always money, like they don't get enough. This article says that between 20 and 50%, depending on the organization, is due to burnout.
I totally believe that. And I think it's more, I think the income is on the lower ones when we're into the $10 to $20 range. But a lot of people I know who are in the $80,000 to $120,000 range who have what you would think is a great job. I have heard this more often lately and through the years, is this workload is just not sustainable.
Yeah.
This is going to kill me.
Absolutely. Especially after our Amazon episode where we talked about the labor people are put under. Like, businesses have optimized so that they know the peak amount of labor they can get out of you. And so business to business, burnout is just a game of we put people under a certain amount of strain and we get the most out of them until they burn out.
Right. They go over that line. They know what the line is and they go well beyond it. And then once you're done, they'll just replace you.
Exactly. So speaking of feeling like a nameless body put into a system and made to work, our dead man here, who is legally not a person anymore, what did he? I would think that after going to the locals and being laughed at and being told you're not, you're dead, you're not real, it must have been an easy fix, right? Like, I imagine he would just go to the next higher court or the next higher, like, whoever had an official clipboard somewhere.
One would think, Joe, it'd be that easy. You go to one more office or fill out one more form, one more phone call, right?
Right.
He would work 17 years obsessively to get his name back.
17. He's legally dead because of this tiny bit of land and these couple of jerks. 17 years.
I couldn't help but laugh in the opening about the kidnapping of the cousin.
Yeah.
Hi, Uncle. Cute little kid.
Well, the kid clearly wanted to go see movies. Like, he was into it, so.
It was a win-win, right? Didn't get the results he wanted. So Lee Behari, he actually added the title of Miritak, which means dead man, to his name. So he started going by that, calling himself that.
Okay. He's kind of a baller move.
Yeah, he started an association of all dead people, his own people. And it came to very quickly got to about 100 people.
That's awesome.
Now, finally, a big changing point in his life was there was this politician guru that came and talked to him. And I'm going to try to pronounce his name. His name, Shyam La Kanaja. So I apologize to any of our Indian listeners. By Hari, his case was going absolutely nowhere. And this guru told him to just embrace being dead. Add it to your name. It's just a ballsy move.
I like that. Do they have vanity plates in India? Because wouldn't that be a badass vanity plate if it was just like DEDMAN, like dead man?
Dead man. I can see him driving around Oh boy, you have an active imagination.
I'm in. I'm with Law. Like, let's do this.
You've been dead for years. You would understand this. You're a walking zombie.
Working Graveyard does that too. Yeah.
So this was a changing point in La Behari's life. He flipped a switch and he decided to just own it. And so he'd answer the phone. Hello, dead man here. Now, he's been doing all the right things by trying to get himself arrested, going to Parliament, filling out forms, waiting in lines, protesting, which can put you in prison.
Literally, while we were doing this research, I Googled protesters arrested. It's every month, it seems like. That, like, protesters there, you lock them up. That's what you do.
Well, this being a spectacle, making fun of himself, actually began to work. It started getting the best results so far of all the things he tried.
Okay.
And I read all these stories, different stories, and I can't share all of them. We don't have time, about all these people he helped. There was a man, a 75-year-old. Now, this guy, this is even worse. His own son had killed him off. And this guy said if it wasn't for La Behari and all the hard work he did over these 17 years, he would still be dead. And he's forever thankful to him.
That is awesome. I like any story where we find out that somebody brings an issue to light and they start sort of like, they shed light on it and people come together around it.
So La Behari, when he started out, Joe, he just wanted to get his name back and get his land back. But all told, all these years, he ended up helping thousands of people.
That's impressive. I will never be able to help thousands of people by answering my stupid emails or buckling down and actually reading like website, user agreements. If we tried, do you want to know how long it would take?
How long will it take? I'm gonna say this is first world problems compared to that, right?
Yeah, one would argue that reading an end user license agreement for a video game might be a little bit less important than getting yourself declared undead.
But on point, how long would it take to read all those emails?
Okay. We have data for, we'll start with the emails. On average, and this is according to Adobe, they're not polling workers, American workers, to ask, how long do you answer emails? They're actually taking data just from like monitoring emails. So according to them, and this is quote, emails continue to be a preferred way to ask coworkers for quick questions, which is 39% of emails in the work setting, provide status updates, which is 57%, and feedback. I didn't really believe this. Like, I looked it up in multiple sources because I'm like, this can't possibly be true. When they combine the hours of emails, how long it takes, it's about 4 hours, 4 hours a day.
4 hours.
It doesn't feel like that. Like when I finally wrapped my head around it, I realized what was happening. It's checking emails while you're watching Netflix.
Oh, just kind of checking in on your phone. It's funny because you never return any of my emails for about a week. So maybe you just delete mine or spam mine, right? Have you sent me directly to spam?
No.
You just read them and say, fuck that
maybe.
guy.
I have a lot of filters in place. I'm the worst person to email, by the way. I'm because I work nights, I use that as an excuse to be like, sorry, I didn't get your email until morning. Todd's emails aside, most people check 3 to 4 hours of emails a day. Now, the Washington Post crunched the numbers, so we don't have to. By the way, Todd's emails are super short. They're like 5 words, and I still ignore them.
They're misspelled. They're three-lettered words that are misspelled.
Yeah. So out of this 4.1 hours, Todd's emails are 5 minutes. But if you add up all work emails for the average worker, it's about 47,000 hours over a career. Which, how long does it take to master something? 10,000 hours, according to Gladwell?
So how much of your life do we spend just reading emails?
47,000 hours, just work emails, not just like, not emails from friends, cousins, Adidas shoes, like whatever you want to sign up for. So if mastering a subject takes 10,000 hours and answering all of your work emails is 47,000 hours, that's 4 things you could have mastered in that time, and then plus 7,000 more hours.
That's just, think of all the things you could master. You could learn 5 languages. You write a best-selling book.
Right.
You could work more.
Yeah.
How many of those do you think are important? 1 out of 10, maybe.
1 out of 10 is stretching it. Those are things that could have been covered just by a quick question, literally walking by in the hall. I also wanted to know what this all like, not the emails. That was sort of like a fun tangent, but I wanted to look at how much does errand paralysis and cognitive strain, like how much does sort of modern living and all these business hoops, how much does it cost us mentally? I got this from Science Mag, and they had a really good sort of like, it's mostly related to what we're talking about. This is how many IQ points do we sacrifice by being poor? Now,
I've done this one. So,
now I don't mean specifically being poor, like how much does it cost you mentally, because it like being poor does not mean you're stupid. What it actually means is the lower you are in the financial brackets in America, the more hoops you're given. So like if you were in the lowest tax bracket in America, you have the most paperwork to fill out. You have the most wait times on the phone asking for assistance. You have to double check with medical systems to be like, can I have this operation? Yeah, like you jump double and triple the hoops as somebody in the highest tax bracket.
That doesn't seem fair. Should be exact same line.
Right, one would think. But what money really actually does, like having a good amount, it frees you up from processes. Like you delegate to, you have a tax guy. Like that's the best way I can think of it is you have a tax guy, you have an HR department, you have a union that is managing your medical instead of you directly.
Assistants, receptionist.
Right. So you offload these things. If you don't have any of that, living in poverty is akin to losing 13 IQ points.
Wow.
So if you are of the IQ average, if you're 100, this just dropped you below average just by a little bit.
13 is significant.
It is very significant. So yeah, the cognitive load of all this. I'm gonna read a quote here. To be poor is to have very little mental bandwidth to make decisions, good or otherwise. And that was basically the summary to this article. I thought that was very succinct and very helpful.
Your decision making gets poorer because you just don't have as much. You're just tired. You're fatigued.
Yeah, exactly. If you stop to read all of the privacy policies from all the websites you visit, do you know what I'm talking about? Like when you click on a website and it pops up like a banner at the bottom that's like,
oh, I know what it is. It's a little box. You just check it and move on.
yeah, exactly. If you're a normal human being,
lose those 13 points.
Yeah, exactly. Have you ever stopped to read them? Just be like,
never ever.
You actually want to know?
Never ever.
This comes from The Atlantic. They said the median length of a privacy policy from the top 75 websites is about 2,500 words. And if you go at the average rate of somebody reading, and if you stop to read every privacy policy you encounter online, like in your day-to-day, not like this is an above-average user or something like that, it would take you 25 days out of every year just to read website privacy policies.
So I always think of some Notre Dame graduate attorney who's just writing these over and rewriting.
Can I grind an axe here on the show?
Oh God, you're gonna vent.
I want to vent.
God.
I want to talk about medical billing.
Keep it short, though, would you?
I can't promise that. So I already started by talking about like I had it was a scan of my head, and like I spent time in the hospital. Not long. It was like an evening in the hospital, and then I ended up being stuck with the bill. Medical billing. Have you ever gotten a bill and it feels like intentionally confusing?
Oh yeah. Now keep in mind, Joe and I have a lot of experience in this. I'm not going to tell you our whole medical history because that would require a couple of shows.
Accident prone and health prone.
We look relatively healthy, but on the inside.
I am not even kidding with this. A doctor asked me to summarize my general health. I told him failed necromancy. Somebody tried to bring me back to life. It didn't work. So we've read a lot of medical bills. Do you ever feel like you overpaid?
Oh, I have.
Okay, yeah, I have too.
Well, I went in for some head problems, and I don't mean the brain stuff that you had, but just some behavior issues, and I've been diagnosed with bipolar and this and that. So I went in. I got on my wife's insurance. I changed insurance. I went to a new place, and the first doctor I talked to, she wasn't a psychiatrist. She seemed to do pretty much nothing. She was like this in between the doctors, right?
Okay. She was like an evaluation.
Yeah, and she looks at my insurance. She says, "You have awesome insurance." So she started making all these appointments for me.
No God.
So I thought awesome insurance means they pay for everything, right? And I came home and I said to my wife, I go, "I heard we have awesome insurance." She said, "No, we have shit insurance."
Oh, no.
And so she booked a lot of unnecessary appointments, and it ended up costing me thousands of dollars. And I just thought, oh, wow, because I didn't read, I didn't do my due diligence. I just accepted what she said as being, authority on it.
Right. I think both with bills and with people sitting across from you at the desk when you're in a hospital, between both of those, you kind of just accept that they are the authority and they at least know what they should be charging you.
A physician's idea of bills and our idea of bills is very different.
Yeah, totally. I do. The thing that kills me, I do look over my bills. Like I go through the list. I make sure everything, like I'm coming out of a grocery store. I read the receipt. I make sure I got the things that I got.
I use mine to start fires in my fireplace. Kindling.
Probably a healthier way to deal with it. Honestly, if you die in debt, you might be mentally healthier for it as long as you didn't read that stuff. I'm kidding. Don't do that, everybody. So we're going to read this is from consumerreports.org. And they basically, it's an article talking about how everyone is sick of confusing medical bills. They say in here, quote, in a national representative consumer report, they surveyed 1,000 insured adults who incurred major medical bills in the last 2 years. And they said that 2 out of 3 said they had at least one billing issue, such as higher than expected charges, unclear statements, things like that when the bills arrived, or the bills themselves arrived months late. Because the bills themselves are so confusing, I mean, like they're filled with special items and they totally lack clarity, and they don't always say what your insurer is responsible for. Because of that, millions of Americans, like we said, like 2 out of 3 who found these problems, a lot of them just let it go. Like they give up trying to pay it.
Because they get frustrated, and we're not all sophisticated at different levels. We don't understand everything, and we're busy with life and kids and work, and we're just exhausted.
Exactly. It is the Aaron fatigue. Like this is the medical billing is oftentimes the cherry on top of Aaron fatigue.
I want to point out too, Joe, that people say, well, you just need to do your due diligence. I read all my mail. I'm real on top of this. There's a 99.9% chance that you've missed lots of things. You just don't know that.
Right. And it's not just this one isolated incident. This isn't the medical billing episode. This is your life is full of due diligence. You can only keep that up for so long. In this article, they said 20% of the group that paid more than $1,000 a piece, they stated the reason for paying that was that the bill was too confusing. And they were concerned, and this one really struck me. This is why I did it. They were concerned that not paying or delaying payment would hurt their credit score. So
the fear.
Yeah. This is from a professor of economics who they quoted in this article. The medical billing system is so inefficient and complicated, people don't even know how to make a dispute. And this is Martin Gaynor, professor of economics and health policy at Carnegie Mellon. He said they just throw up their hands.
I don't know how I missed this one, because we could do another episode on this one. Gym memberships or any kind of athletic clubs you join to buy athletic shoes. You want to talk about confusing and added fees and first and last. And it's all set up to charge you more than their service is giving you.
I remember I was listening to a comedian who was like, a gym membership is just a fat tax after you stop going and you continue paying. So when a corrupt system gets this big, we're gonna get back to Lal Bahari real quick. How do you break a system that large? Like if something like our medical system or like our user agreements, those are all small potatoes compared to a government that won't recognize that you're alive. How do you end a problem like this?
Well, as hard as Lal Bahari worked and his 100 followers, I won't say followers, but the people he was doing, the Dead Man Association, and women, dead men and women, happens to women as well. How do all big things, corruption, government, how do they all finally change? It's not from people dying. It's not from people being broke, starving to death. What's the way they all die, Joe?
I assume they all look deep into their soul, and rich people take pity on us.
They feel guilty and decide it's finally time to do the right
Scrooge.
thing.
The movie Scrooge taught me that.
The only way that there's change in this world, in my very humble opinion, is when there's a lot of bad press and people start getting humiliated. And that's what happened here.
Right. Public humiliation. I was going to go with that next after, conscience.
So Time Magazine caught wind of this story. And Time Magazine's a big, international magazine. So they wrote about it. And that started the investigation. So the government got involved, and they found a total of, first it started out at 91 cases. Then it went to 303 cases. And this was interviewing a bunch of revenue officials.
Revenue officials. Okay, so these aren't the dead men and women. These are the officials allowing the corruption.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
So
okay.
They rolled over 303, right? That's something. Well, not in a big country like India. Labahari and all of his people think there must have been tens of thousands of people that this happened to.
Wow.
On the low end. So after the Time magazine, then guess who caught wind of that? Probably they were just modeling. The Time magazine, National Geographic got a hold of it.
Okay.
And so more cases started to get dug up.
Right. More light means more discovery.
Now, so what are you thinking now? This has stopped, right? This took care of it. Time, National Geographic, all these public officials. Corruption's been stomped out of India. What do you think?
Right. That must have solved it completely.
They are still going on. It's probably going on more than ever. And the dead men have to be as creative as these public officials are to cover this. So they're coming up with new gimmicks every day. They're getting more creative. And the reason they're doing that is to get more press, because they've realized the only way to get out of this and expose it is to embarrass through the media.
Okay. I hate to say it, but I think that is a solution that has worked in America. Like, I think that usually yields better results and more results.
More than life or death, believe it or not.
Right, exactly. So we don't want to get to the end of our podcast without offering a solution. And this is a problem that frequently looks like it doesn't have a solution.
So you're not going to throw away your computer, your laptop, your cell
No.
phone? That's not an option?
Unfortunately. A lot of self-help gurus love to tackle errand paralysis and burnout. It's a thing they can talk about that doesn't require a degree. It doesn't require intense study.
Any science or history? Or
It's something they can basically just comment on guiltlessly. We here at the Reengineered You, we're not going to recommend a beach vacation.
Yeah, love yourself.
Eat, pray, love. Leave your phone at home for a week. Yeah, that's not going to help you. When you come home, if you want to have a home, you're going to have to get right back on that train and start dealing with errands again. So for this, I went through, it was a hilarious PowerPoint from Stanford University School of Medicine. And this is what they teach their internists. This is what they teach their people. And it was a hilarious PowerPoint. We're going to have links to it. I hope that's okay with Stanford. And it had like kitschy, like anyone's college PowerPoint. It had like frozen images from like Home Alone and other goofy things. Office Space.
It's worth your time. It's entertaining.
It's fun.
And true.
But the thing we want to stress over and over again, errand paralysis and burnout are real things. Number one is you may feel like you are being a whining millennial, even if you're not in the millennial generation. You may feel like you are making up problems. You are not. Burnout is real. It accounts for...
It has real physical consequences.
Yes, and it is 8% of the medical industry. So you're not making it up when it is 1/10 of all medical problems. Burnout comes with fatigue, insomnia, anxiety, substance abuse, heart disease, obesity, stroke. So basically everything that general stress does, burnout can do for you. So it is not made up, and it comes with consequences. Now, one of the things that I have noticed or felt on my own personal level with burnout, Todd mentioned that I oftentimes ignore emails for several days at a time.
Just mine.
Just yours.
Apparently.
When you talk to people and when you email people and when you meet new people, Just let them know what your commitment level is. Know them how often you can engage, and set real boundaries. Like tell people they won't hate you for it. That's the thing. People don't want to be disliked in life. It is completely honest to look at somebody in the eye and say, I will get back to you. Like, I'm slow to answer emails. Or tell people, hey, I'm kind of busy. Generally speaking, I will definitely get back to you when I can. But, I won't be able to go out to if somebody invites you to their bowling team, you can say, I'm more than willing to bowl with you on, Wii Sports or whatever game platform is out. But I won't be able to join your physical team.
You have to say no to a lot of people.
Yeah. I'm going to quote Warren Buffett. Warren Buffett says, really successful people say no to almost everything. And that is what you'll have to feel comfortable doing, and then also feel comfortable calling that person up later again and getting back into business with whatever you were talking about. That's not from Stanford. That's just our nattering on the podcast. One of the things you can do to help yourself too, and this is from the PowerPoint, avoid labeling yourself. If you get behind and you get slammed with a medical bill, or you can't sharpen your knives this week, or if you don't get a rebate in time and you end up paying $1,000 for something you don't need, if you miss points on your free pizza, don't label yourself a failure or a loser or something. It's far easier to look at that thing for the value it was or wasn't. Don't discount positive things in life. That's something that's very easy to do. Like, we look at this giant pile of things we haven't gotten done, this errand paralysis, and we weigh that giant pile versus the small pile we have done. Do not discount those positive things, the things that we've completed or the things that you like. Know that you can't read minds or tell fortunes. Don't catastrophize everything. If you miss something, like week by week, if you miss something that costs you money, or if you end up having to go run an extra errand, it's not a catastrophe. It's not an event. This isn't the Odyssey. It is just another small thing that you are going to step over. And then in the rear view of your life, it will look very small. And finally, and this is one that a sin that I commit a lot, they say don't overcommit. A lot of people look at their job and they say, my reputation or raise or resume hinges on me helping with this one small thing. Or if I don't do this, I'll let people down.
Or the social. I have a problem with the social tax that I can't.
Social tax. That is a good, yes, that absolutely. I have the problem with that too.
Because it takes away, you can only do so many things. So if you're trying to master something, or you're trying to do the activities you really like, you can't do everything at work or in your home life, because something else is going to suffer.
Right, exactly. Except that a small minimum amount of things just simply will not get done each week. Don't throw them onto the pile next week. Try to find realistic ways to where you won't need them in the future. If you can't handle pizza rebates or points or an app, like if you can't sign up for an email for one more service, don't. Just accept that that's one more thing on the pile of things that you don't want to put time into. Like Todd said, I shouldn't be reading every internet privacy policy as I go site to site.
And I have a solution that is something we talked about in our Entourages episode. Do you remember that?
Yeah.
Well, I learned this from a friend who's a writer from New York, very successful. And she said there's a lot of college students that for $15 an hour, and this is what she's been done for years, she meets with them for 4 hours a week, gives them a pile of these lower level delegate things. And she said it's made her life so much easier.
That's awesome. Yeah, $15 an hour. Somebody will take your errand paralysis from you for a bit.
They'll pay you back 100 times.
Yeah. Very lastly, if you are out of solutions, you've tried all these things, they're not working. Somebody very smart told me, talk to yourself as if you're talking to a small child. It is a much more compassionate way to deal with yourself when you feel like you're failing at life. And another approach with this is just think, Would you let a friend talk to the way you are talking to yourself if you get behind on errands? Would you let any of your friends talk to you this way? Because oftentimes the answer is no, you would not be friends with them.
Just beating themselves up unnecessarily over stupid shit.
Right. So, Todd, when we need a movie to watch to sort of accompany our rampant marathon of answering emails, what are we watching next?
There's a movie that was released January 7th, 2021. New movie, independent movie. It's called Kagaze, and it's about our story, about our hero here.
Okay.
Yeah. So talk about press. So there's been 2 major articles in international papers. And then Labahari has his own movie, and it's against Indian bureaucracy. And so this movie's about his fight that went on for 19 years that we already told you about. So the media continues to promote this and continues to embarrass the government in the hopes of there someday being change.
As there should. This is not an anti-government podcast, but anytime we end a show where like a movie was made and it was a egg in the face of the authority, I enjoy that.
Well, Joel, when we're doing the research for this episode, I have known 2 people personally have gotten so burned out from work, who were hard workers, good people, who had mental breakdowns. Do you know anyone like that?
Yes, I knew a guy back in college, and about 4 years ago, coworker of mine.
It's very, very sad. And it's very, very ugly. And it's permanent damage. So that's how serious this can get.
Right.
When I think about all the corruption that goes on and all the greed in any country, especially in America too, you always think you have all these rights and but they get away with it for years. And records, you always think, you've always heard words can kill. So can't records and paperwork.
Bills and receipts.
Now I think about in this country, the most vulnerable people being people with handicaps and the elderly.
Yes.
How much fraud and taking advantage do you think the loved ones, and not of all of them, but fraud has gone on in this country, taking advantage of their elderly especially? I personally bet it's in the billions.
I'm willing to say that it's in the hundreds of billions. And on top of that, if I feel fatigued and I'm very good at using the internet, how the hell does somebody who is in their 70s keep up with what is being demanded of them by businesses and by government as far as billing, receipts, check boxes, and making a new account online go?
Yeah, and a lot of people are these people's family members.
Right, exactly.
Millennial burnout used to be a myth until Aaron's automated systems, online applications, and reimbursement forms became the standard for businesses to recoup nickels and dimes. We didn't try to break the system either. We, the public, tried to win it with our American ideas of hard work and efficiency. So now we have ultra complex medical billing, and every receipt we get from a fast food restaurant has a questionnaire on the back. Burnout at work can account for 20 to 50% of all turnover. It's 8% of the nation's health spending, and it costs us $125 billion a year. And the more cognitive load you put on someone, like being poor or having to jump through paperwork hoops for aid, the more it effectively lowers your IQ to the tune of 13 points. If you receive the average number of work emails per day and actually stop to read them, you'll be burning 47,000 hours over a lifetime. Read every privacy policy on your favorite websites. It's 76 days if you did it as a full-time job. Lots of surveys, rebates, polls, and statements that are given to us as free services are actually designed to blend into the background of Aaron noise. And medical billing can be designed to capitalize on our errand fatigue, to charge us more money when we're not checking the right column or box. So if you feel stressed from adulting, if you feel like you're lazy or like you're a failure because you can't bring yourself to read one more billing statement, understand that you're not imagining your fatigue. You are not alone. In fact, the system is designed to capitalize on that exhaustion. There are steps you can take to shake off that fatigue, but the first one is to recognize the errand trap we've all been put in and recontextualize it. Besides, if you put off one online rebate, it's not as if you're legally declared dead. You've been listening to The Reengineered You. Thank you so much for listening to the show. You mean the world to us. We have a new episode every week.
You can connect with us at www.re-engineeredyou.com. That's where we have research links, show notes, and blog articles for each of our episodes. We also appreciate feedback, and we love spirited debates.
We're not experts in anything, but we've got an opinion on everything.